Hello and welcome to Bread Coding, the channel where we earn our bread by coding. And in this tutorial, I've actually added the ability to crouch and not be able to uncrouch when there's object on top of you. So I'll be showing you how to do that. And aside from that, I've also made some improvements to the code and added a first-person body. For now, it's pretty basic, and a third-person mode. So as you can see, you can actually go into third person and look around and move and do all the things that you can do in first person as well. So let's get started with this. Alright, so the first thing we're actually going to be doing is we're going to go to Visual Studio, and I'm going to show you what I've added. So first off, we go to the Input Manager, and in here I've added quite a couple things. So in Update, I've added these things here. So let's start explaining. So if you actually press the crouch key, you now check if you're crouched, and if you are crouched, then you also check a function from the character motor that I think we were doing already. We were getting it here, character motor, and you check if the player can uncrouch. Now let's first see what this function does. So if you go in here, you can see it's actually a boolean, returns a boolean, and what this function does is it does a physics.overlap sphere, which basically just creates an invisible sphere and checks what colliders are in there. And it does it at the position of the player, and I just add a offset, which you can see has this variable, uncrouch detection sphere height multiplier. So it's just to add an offset. The value for the uncrouch detection sphere is 1.6. And after that, we use the controller radius. As you can see, the second parameter is the radius. And for a layer mask, we use the uncrouch detection mask. Now this is also a private variable. We actually have it up here, uncrouch detection mask. Now it's set to default, and I've set the player and all its child objects to player layer. This will actually make sure that the overlap sphere doesn't actually find the player as a collider. So it only will find objects that have colliders and are on top of the player. Now, then we just check if we found any colliders in there, and if we didn't find any colliders, then we return true. We can actually uncrouch, and if not, we return false. So in here, as you can see, there's no colliders, then this will return true. Or this actually only works if you're crouched, because you just toggled it while being crouched. But if you're not crouched, then we also just go in here. So we just toggle the value, just as we did before, and now we actually call a function on the motor as well, called onToggleCrouch. Now, onToggleCrouch does what the check on update did before. It just starts the transition and actually resets the crouch lerp. So as you can see, I've actually deleted it from here, and we only really have it on toggle crouch. So now that this is actually better because it'll only get called once. Well, we were calling it once before too, but we were actually checking it in update all the time. So this is better, and we've actually deleted the variable that was crouched. So we can save that. Now I've also done this with the camera handler. As you can see, camera handler also has a on view change, and if we go in here, you can see that it's basically the same thing. So it's just resetting the lerper and starting the transition. And the update does the same thing, just updates the transition. And I'll show you what this is right now. Just let's go here. So yeah, that's uncrouching, basically. And now on to the next thing, which is third person. As you can see, we have the code here. Just check if we press the tab key. I just set it to tab. You can set it to whatever you want, as always. And then we toggle the third person boolean value, which I've set up here, just as all the other ones. And then we call camera handler dot on view change, just as we do here, because we're actually using the same lerper for both the third person lerp and the crouch lerp for the camera. So it's just this view lerp here. And that gets called, and now it gets into update, and it does the same things that it did on the character motor. But in here, it actually goes in here and it checks what our normal position is. So if we're crouched, it just gets the crouch position, and if not, it just gets the normal position. Now this is basically the position the camera has when in first person, and it can either be the crouched or the standing. Then we check the goal position, which is going to be the position we're going to lerp to, and we check if it's in third person. So if this here has been pressed, then we just lerp to the TP position, which is just a variable here. I've set it to -4 on the z-axis. And if not, we just go to the first person position. And as always, we just use the lerper and stuff. And yeah, that is how we do the lerp for the third person camera. Now, we also change a bit how we actually use the mouse look. So instead of only using these here, we check if we're actually in third person or we're in first person. And if we're in first person, we use the normal values. But if not, we put the whole thing, like the mouse Y and the mouse X, we put both of them in one quaternion, and we use that for the pivot. Now the pivot is actually a object that I created that stays right under the player and is the parent of the camera. So this is the object we're going to be rotating. This makes it so if the camera is actually here and we rotate the pivot, the camera rotates around it. That's why we have a pivot. So let's go back. So we make the pivot rotate instead of the camera, and then we make the pivot, we make the camera look at the pivot. So we make sure that it's always looking at it. This will give the third person camera effect. And then here, we just do the local rotation for the camera, and the local rotation for the pivot, and that's about it. I've also added the slurp for the camera, but this is just a simple lerp as the other ones we had. So there's not much difference with it. So yeah, that's about it for this one. So in the next one, I'll show you how to actually add animations to this, and we'll start with the third person controller. So yeah, see ya.